What's up? What's up? What's up, everybody? This is Joe back for a cop talk. I assembled a panel this evening. I have said law enforcement. I got Shane, law enforcement. I got Kenny. He said, I'm just a guy. I got my boy Rick from Mint Condition. And then I got Liz. We sitting here, we just had a conversation with the Dr. Gibson, the implicit bias specialist. She gave us a little rundown on her expertise in implicit bias. And this is just the after the conversation, and we're bringing in conversations from use of force to implicit bias to racism. We're holding a conversation. If you want to ask a question, just YouTube, just Marie has all the questions and she'll chime in any question that you have for any of the panelists. Go ahead, Mitch. Start off where you let off.
Well, I was just trying to point out that we can't look at homicides as the only category to determine how aggressive cops can be. You could be, civilians or a suspect can give you can be aggressive back to a cop, whether it's burglary, whether it's robbery, what is, in a case like Eric Garner, he was not committing a homicide. It was just over cigarettes. And yet it took 6-7 cops and ultimately he died. And so I just want to make sure that we making the correlations correctly, because an article I sent over today shows that blacks are less aggressive to cops, but yet they get more aggressive aggression from cops. You look at the Ferguson study, that also showcased where it's not about aggressive, but it showcased that whites actually carry drugs at a higher rate compared to blacks, but yet they were arrested less compared to blacks. And so I just want to make sure we can't use the homicide category, because there's 20-something categories of crime, and you can be aggressive or pose a threat in any one of those categories, whether it's prostitution, burglary, or just a routine traffic stop.
Now, I agree to a degree on what you're saying, but when we start looking at how we are, I guess, looking at use of force, the reason why I have a problem with these type of conversations, these numbers, because you got justified use of force, and right, it gets thrown into the category of unjustified. We start talking about, the police have this amount of shootings last year, the year before, and you get this big ass number. But when you break it down, the majority of those forces are justified. I don't think there's one person in this panel, regardless of whether you pro cop or not, will argue if an officer encounters someone that's preventing deadly force, the officer is authorized to use deadly force. So I hate when they have these broad numbers, because what we have these conversations about is a very small percent of the total package. And for the record, you said the Eric Garner incident, right? And this just drives me crazy, because this is a Giuliani tactic. I policed under that era. Giuliani would, if there's any gray area with the police and a citizen, and it's not cut and dry, the police was just right, what he'd do was he would grab the background, he'd pull a criminal record check, and he would just blast it out to try to give a negative viewpoint of this individual. So if the officers was somewhat in the gray area, you as the average citizen want to give the officer the benefit of the doubt now, because you're dealing with somebody with a long criminal record. For the record, and I looked into this time and time again, everybody talk about Eric Garner was selling cigarettes. That day, Eric Garner had nothing to do with selling cigarettes. I've asked several officers from the precinct. I'm from New York. Nobody can testify that Eric Garner was selling cigarettes. Eric Garner has a history of being arrested for selling cigarettes in the past. That particular day, Eric Garner was walking towards the store. There was a fight among some juveniles. He intervened as one of the old cats from the neighborhood and was like, yo, y'all doing this? All you're going to do is bring police to this environment. Y'all going to make the whole spot hot. Look, here they come. You hear the sirens. Y'all need to leave. Everybody starts walking away from this particular store. Officers who dealt with Eric Garner in the past on giving them summons and citing them for illegal cigarettes wanted to talk to him and find out like what was going on based on the radio calls. I don't want to talk to you. Got nothing to say. Leave me alone. I got nothing to say. And then we saw everything that happened on cam. To have a solicitation charge, there has to be an exchange. I got to be offering this, and you in exchange for that, money, product. So none of that occurred during the Eric Garner charge. Eric Gardner, yes, we can, as an officer, we can walk up and try to have a field interview. But if we don't have nothing to hold you, a good cop would say, yeah, just let them walk. These individual officers, Officer Pantaleo, who has a history of bad policing, the city, the taxpayers of New York has paid out already thousands of dollars for him violating people's rights. He decided that he didn't like the fact that Eric Gardner did not want to talk to him, and he was walking away, and that's when you seen the encounter take place.
Joe,
Eric Gardner was not being arrested for selling illegal cigarettes.
Joe, that's a good cleanup, right? And I appreciate that. But that makes my point a little bit stronger, right? To say he was not committing a homicide for sure, right? He wasn't even selling cigarettes, right?
No.
You was painting a picture that he's even more innocent, but yet he got a lot more aggression from the cops. And so
unlawfully.
I just want, absolutely. So I just want to showcase that we can't use the homicide category to determine which group is more aggressive or not aggressive towards cops.
Set?
I mean, not to that, because I think how Mitch uses statistical data is incorrect, and I don't want to. I mean, you can't apply a Ferguson study to it's actually 17,000 police departments. I actually looked it up in a study the other day. I have an issue with doing a study here and a study there, and then applying a blanket formula to all law enforcement. So I don't want to get stuck on that. So we can move on.
Okay, and the study that he's referring to was just Ferguson PD alone, correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
So in it study aggression, study targeting of the Black community, right? So if we're going to use the homicide category, which is 4,000 people that Cedric mentioned, we can now nationalize that statistic and says, you know what, Black people are inherently dangerous. That's why
nobody said that. But to destroy your argument, the FBI statistics, are they just from one state or are they national statistics?
They're national. They're national.
Is the Ferguson study national or just a city statistic?
That's a city statistics. But it's what you're studying, though. You're talking about a homicide. Eric Garner does not fit in a homicide category. I use that as an example to show you that there's aggression from cops that don't fit based on a homicide.
I don't think that's anybody's argument. You're making an argument that I'm not even trying to make.
So what was your argument?
We're talking about why there are more uses of force.
Correct.
And I gave you an example by using two categories. I don't think anybody's arguing that the Eric Garner thing was out of line. Joe broke it down. I think I sent you a video when you and I first chatted. I mean, I gave a presentation at a school on the Eric Garner breakdown because it's one of the things we talked about. I'm not okay with that. So, I mean.
But your use of force argument is based on homicides, correct?
Well, I'm my use of force, and the reason why I use homicides because your force is probably more than likely going to be different in apprehending somebody who's violent criminals, right? Overall, I mean, and I know you grabbed the one-off and then used it, right?
I mean, there's use of force in all crimes across the categories. Is what I'm saying to you.
Hey, Mitch,
use of force can be based on the category of the crime, though.
But let me ask you something, and I think I don't know where we're going at here. Y'all trying to compare the actual violation compared to the amount of force.
Well, I just wanted to debunk the theory that, because I heard Ryan lead off with it, and I think Cedric is kind of picking up there, that Blacks are inherently more violent, and that's why.
No, so I'm going to stop you right there when you misrepresent my words. I never said that. I didn't say that one time. I didn't say anybody was inherently violent. I took some sample statistics and gave an explanation to why there could be higher uses of force. It had nothing to do with anybody's color. You just interjected color. I'm giving you a reason why somebody may take somebody into custody with a higher level of force. And everybody on the panel agreed that someone is more than likely to resist from an armed robbery or a homicide than a damn petty theft. I don't know what that has. You took it.
And so what I'm saying is that report doesn't conclude use of force. It just says people were arrested for homicides. There are studies and surveys specifically for use of force, and it debunks the theory that blacks are more aggressive or pose more of a threat compared to the white counterparts. There are specific reports that cover that. One is a Ferguson study around drugs. The article I sent to you today shows that in 2015, blacks were far less danger and pose a danger to cops, but yet they was arrested and shot more.
Kenny, you want to chime in that?
Well, it just sounds like we're kind of having two separate conversations here. You know, Mitch is the conversation that you're having, and I don't think anybody can disagree with that, because you know you're taking Ferguson and all those stats and everything's true for Ferguson. The question is that true or false for the rest of the country, or for the other 17,000 police departments, which is what Sed's talking about.
Thank you.
So,
right, that's true, Ken. I agree with you on that. I'm pointing out one small city in Ferguson, just to give you an example. However, I'm saying looking at homicides in itself does not prove use of force.
I didn't say it was a proof. I gave an example,
or even a correlation.
So you're saying, let's move on, man, because we're going to get stuck on this. I'm just not going to agree with them on it.
Okay.
Because I've been discussing statistics with Mitch for a long time, and I'm just surprised he doesn't really seem to grasp statistical data correctly. So
I don't see the statistical correlation, Cedric. Just because you have 4,000, just because you have 4,000 homicides does not mean that justifies a higher rate of use of force towards blacks when it's 20-something categories.
Could it mean that?
Yeah.
It could also not mean that.
Could it mean that?
It could all. That's what I'm saying. You have to study.
You're not answering my question. You're filibustering right now, because I didn't. When I used that example, Joe, I don't believe I made it an absolute. I presented a reason how it could happen, or why it may happen. I think like Ken's saying, dude, we're talking about, I think, two different things. I'm not even arguing the same point you are. I think you're missing me, because I think you just want to argue.
I honestly don't. I honestly don't. I just wanted to. We're actually talking about the same thing, Cedric. But if you want to move on, we can.
What about
both you and Ryan made the argument that, hey, blacks commit a higher homicide rate, therefore that's why you see a higher use of force rate. I'm saying to you that report doesn't conclude that. There are specific reports that actually conclude differently. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. Now,
I got a question.
Everybody's go with that. Let's talk about the disparities in law enforcement. Ken, I think you had some statistical data on that, right?
Oh, you know, I got Cedric's going to be familiar, I'm sure, with all these, you know, statistics and stuff. And, you know, it talks about how the arrests incidents are higher for marijuana use with, you know, minorities than it is for whites.
Speak up.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're just low.
Oh, okay. You know, there's all kinds of statistics up there, and I can pull them up on I'm using a different laptop here. I can pull them up on the laptop. You know, it talks about marijuana usage, talks about other statistics where, you know, when it comes to court, how the state, you know, the minorities are less frequently when it comes to sentencing guidelines. You know, they're less frequently given opportunities to like turn state's witness and things like that. But again, you know, these stats, they just show the stats are what they are. You know, it doesn't really paint the whole picture. So it requires us to kind of dive a little bit deeper into, you know, why is that? You know, why do African Americans have for murder, typically on average, have a higher sentence than whites for murder? Yeah.
But I think it just goes back to what Dr. Gitzman said earlier about implicit bias. All these rules and laws and things, they were around before any of us were born. And I think that the powers that be, based on what they feel, how things should be, that's why we're in the situation we're in right now. And I think also, as we talked about earlier, because of the media, you know, we talked about media with Dr. Gibson. Early in the 1920s and 1900s, blacks would look like monkeys. We were portrayed as aggressives. Well, it was always something in the media, especially movies, matter of fact, that were made by our white counterparts that put us in a bad light. So that transcends. You keep looking at those images, and before you know it, it's like, okay, these guys are really bad people. So you got to look at, again, the biases, your upbringing. But the key to correct all of this is realizing you have a bias, realizing there's an issue, and then working on that issue. That's the only way that we're going to make a change. And as far as Black people are concerned, we could be that change. You know, if we decide to stop listening to these type of music or type of things that degrade women or degrade gays, things of that sort, we can make that change. And I think that's what we need to do as a people.
You know what I realized when we had Attorney Gordon on? A lot of what we see the disparities on, it's based a lot on economical status. Yeah. When you look at what population holds more of the poverty, it's going to be Blacks, right? So the court system, right, is real harmful for poor people. So when we start looking at disparities, and he made this very clear, you got a lot of whites that gets arrested. Matter of fact, you got more whites getting arrested. But because they can afford a lot more legal representation than the Blacks, you're going to have them challenge the system more. They're going to work out better deals than someone that's poor that gets a legal aid that is encouraging you to take a plea deal and to just, do your little bit of time. You know, I seen that firsthand when I arrested this kid. He had a large amount of drugs on him. And they worked out a deal, because normally when the DA works out a deal with the defense attorney, normally now in my jurisdiction, they would come and they go, "You cool with it? This is what we're going to do it." This particular time, they worked out a deal and they didn't even ask my input on it. And after that, I was like, "Yo, what was that about?" And he was like, pretty much his dad, and they know that the attorney was a really high-powered attorney, and you're talking about him pleading down to like a disorderly conduct charge when he was initially arrested for drugs. And the attorney turned around and said, they're trying to save this kid's record. He's just being an idiot. He didn't even have to be out here doing the things that he was doing, selling drugs. He comes from a nice, wealthy family. So we're trying to save his criminal record. Mm-hmm. And I was just sitting there like, wow, like some poor kid out the project would never get a deal like that. But because he came in with the flamboyant attorney, he was looking good, and he comes from money, he's going to get a deal like that. So a lot of the problems that we look at, which is some real major issues, it has a lot to do with poverty. It has a lot to do with not being able to have money for the right legal representation.
And one of the numbers that kind of just stuck out to me, and this probably leads to why this particular number is the way that it is the, exoneration stats. There's a lot that goes into this. Again, you can't read everything into exoneration stats, but the exoneration rates are much higher among African Americans than whites, among minorities than it is among whites. I don't know exactly why that is. You're gonna have to dive a little bit deeper in that, but that's just kind of mind blowing.
Yeah. One of the cases that I just noticed the other day with the Kim Potter thing, just seeing the young lady that was in the car with Dante Wright and looking at her tears and her crying, like she was in the car when he got shot, and she was the mother of Dante Wright's, I believe, son or kid. Mm-hmm. I mean, like, that was just so sad to watch her testimony and to watch her, watch her crying and everything like that. And I feel that the judge didn't care. Her tears didn't matter over, Kim Potter tears.
And said you had a lot to say about that sentencing. You want to enlighten us on your views on that?
Well, I've been on fire the past 2 days. I went live as soon as I found out it happened. Anybody who's been following me knows I have a serious problem with the sentencing. I've argued with some police officers and former police officers. I think that we we're talking way too much about her as the officer and how remorseful that she is and that she didn't have a past and she's sorry. And to me, I don't care. And we take an oath as officers to do better and be better. And under no circumstance should we ever pull our taser instead of our gun. And people say, well, accidents happen. Well, when those accidents do happen, then I should be punished, right? And I'm sure, Rick, you agree that I should be punished.
Yes.
And one of the things one of the things that really pissed me off is somebody thinking that 2 years is sufficient. Because what is taken away from this, and I just wrote a paper on this last week, that when somebody's punished, it is to do several things, right? It is supposed to rehabilitate the offender. They are serving out their sentence and their punishment. It is also could possibly deter them from committing the crime again, right? But one of the things that we always forget, it is to bring justice to the victim. And in this case, regardless of what this man did in his past, I could care less. He didn't deserve to die that day. So in other felony cases, if I wronged Mitch or if I wronged you, Rick, I would have to pay some sort of restitution to you as a victim, right?
Right.
So if I took your life, I can't pay you restitution. You're no longer around. So now the restitution should be paid in the time. So I shouldn't be just doing 2 years. When people go, oh, well, that's a lot for her. Well, what did the family think? Well, I had actually somebody who works for the DA's office reach out to me when they heard me on the live, who's actually a victim, a victim advocate. And she was like, shame on everybody on that damn live. And I reached out to Joe right after. She said, you are the only one that spoke about the victim's family. This person over 25 years has been dealing with gang and gun violence. So she's been with, I don't know if you guys are familiar with what the victim advocates do. They are from pre-trial to post-trial, with the families. Mm-hmm. And she goes, who cares that this lady was a former police officer? That's why I say you guys might not always agree with what I said, but Rick, I'm consistent. I don't care that she's a cop or not. Right. 2 years, and I know I'm going like long-winded on this, but that's why Joe wanted me to go. Man, I'm passionate about this. Yep. She should at least got the middle. I don't know if she necessarily, because how do you quantify somebody's life? You can't. But if I may have been okay with her doing 4 to 5, but the gall of some of these people just going, well, she had a good heart and all that doesn't bring that young man back.
No, it doesn't. And instead, to piggyback off what you said, I honestly feel that there was no mistake. I'm sorry. I've been trained, SWAT. I've never in my life have I mistaken my taser, my X74, my gun. Never. And I've been in some hot and heavy pursuits. There's no way in the world, the years, what you got, 25 years as an officer at the 20 years, guys? There's no way in the world with all the training, the intake we go through, firearm training, that you're mistaken in the heat of the moment, your taser, which is on your weak side. I'm left-handed, so my gun is on my left side. My taser is on my right side. Not one time, guys, have I ever pulled my taser or pulled my gun and think it was a taser. Never. We're trained. We go through training, guys. Our department every month, every 2 weeks. And when you get on SWAT, you're training every single day. There's no way in the world she pulled her taser thinking it was a gun. I think this whole thing was a farce. I think the justice system there was no justice being done. And Said made an excellent point. What about the victim? What about the victim? There was nothing. What it basically said that, you know what, Dante, your life didn't matter. We don't care about you. In 15 months, I think you get, she might walk out maybe in 12 months or 14 months. Good behavior, right? Yeah. She's out of there. She's done. His life meant nothing. And that sends a bad message to the world, to the public. I have to agree with my brother on that one.
And you know what?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I want to ask something. Do you think that her sentence was so light because of her white privilege or because she was a police officer?
I actually
I think
believe
both.
that
Probably
I
both.
think that actually because she was a female.
Right.
Mm.
Exactly. Do you notice that judge
Ah,
was? I'm sorry. The judge was so quiet and meek, and well, this case is not like so and so. She tried to set the scene. I knew what was going to happen. It was because she was a woman, first off, and then judge's mind, she felt this case was different. When this case has nothing to do with what happened with over at the guy over at who died.
George Floyd.
Yeah, George Floyd. This was a case deal with, you know what, you made a mistake. If I made a mistake and I got, like said, I'm held to a higher standard. You would put me under, if it was me, they would have put me under the jail. Okay? I'd have been under the jail. I would not be in this panel. Nice knowing y'all. Done. But when it came to her being a woman, being white, that played a big part in her sentencing. And I guess if any other officers on the panel, we would be done. Yeah,
I think
this was just terrible.
And
So-
Shane,
And I don't believe it was an accident. I
No.
believe that some
no, it wasn't.
people do. I mean, they know what works. They know what to say. And so her saying taser, 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 like right then and there, she was, putting down the foundation of her case to get out of this like she did.
Hey, Rick,
Correct. Let me ask Joe.
Hey, Shane,
have you ever used your taser instead of your weapon? Have you ever made that mistake ever in your life?
You asking me?
I'm asking Joe.
No, I never done that. No. But
Said.
let me ask you something though.
Go ahead.
With this atmosphere, and I don't know, I think I'm probably gonna get a lot of backlash right now, but this is keep it real. Do you really believe, right, that she meant to grab a gun and shoot in this environment under those circumstances? There's so many other ways that if you just want to kill somebody, you can kind of make it look a little bit more believable than that.
Joe,
That's just the first thing that came to her mind.
I think she just like this lady had no business being a cop. I think her stress level rose so damn high, right, that she had no idea what she was doing. And I'm not saying this to offend her. I think she should have did 10 plus in prison. She took a life. People going to say it's a mistake. I'm just saying, me personally, I really don't believe that this lady grabbed her gun and said, I'm going to kill this dude. Like, everybody got body cameras on. This environment is expressly where she's at. You can't do nothing out in that environment. If you're going to actually try to do some bad police work or it got to be a whole lot better than that. That girl got 26 years on the job.
Let me say this.
A horrible damn cop, and I honestly don't believe that was an intentional. Now,
I think it's really difficult to make that intentional because I mean, there would have to been so much like her plotting. Okay, I'm gonna pull my gun and say taser, 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 and the way she fell apart as soon as it happened with her spontaneous statement. I think her spontaneous statement and her just falling apart the way she did as soon as it happened. I don't believe that she intentionally shot him. I think that she actually was negligent. I don't even call it a mistake because I think like spilling a cup of coffee is an accident.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this is negligent, and this is what I argued ad nauseum the other night to those other guys on the live. And like Shane, I had, and Joe's gonna laugh. I think I had about 4 taser deployments in 1 month.
Wow, he's getting in, bro.
Big time.
But where I get to be very comfortable, because Ryan was telling me I need to go look at force science. I go, I don't need to read force science. I lived it. I never accidentally shot any of those 4 guys. I pulled my taser each and every time and deployed it. I never shot them. So I have to know better. And if you're in over your head as an officer, knowing that because we go, the pushback I got the other night, fellas, as well, he created his own set of circumstances by not complying. There's a reason why we train. I train because if God forbid, if I need to take Rick into custody and Rick decides he's not going to go to jail today, I should have the training that's going to be appropriate to taking him into custody. That's what I trained for. Now, if it escalates to a deadly force situation where Rick pulls out a gun or a knife, that's different. But you have somebody who is actively trying to flee. Your force needs to equate that. I'm sorry, she's negligent. I don't want to hear about any damn accidents on her part, you know, and I hate when we do, well, they created their own circumstances. Well, we can say the judge created the circumstances by granting him OR. You know, it could be just so many damn things. So I think that we just have to, you know, it is what it is. She messed up.
But wasn't Kim Potter, wasn't she involved in another cover up of a murder?
I don't know anything about that.
Well, there is something.
Somebody
here.
got shot.
I think what puzzled me with the case, with the sentencing, because there's already precedent been set, right? You have the Botham Jean kid that was killed in Dallas. That officer, white female officer, she got 10.
Yeah.
She's trying to walk her years down from there. You have Muhammad Noor in the same city, not in the same city. I don't think he was in the same city as was Deontay Wright shot in Minneapolis?
Yes. Well,
He was.
Brooklyn
Okay.
Park. You know, 20
So
minutes.
same city. So you have Muhammad Noor, who also made a mistake, right? He feared for his life. He shot someone unfortunate. He got 12 years. So you have two cases that have precedent for 8 to 12 years. So it's very hard to understand how she got 2 years. And it doesn't help increase the trust from the community to the police when you see this type of injustice happening.
Yeah. Well, when that happened with him, we knew, you know, this whole thing started in Minneapolis like years ago from the you know, the prosecutors not prosecuting police. You know, we knew in like 2000, the activist was telling the DA and telling the city that the city is going to burn like in 2015 if they don't stop doing something. You know, if they don't stop letting officers off. And so, you know, and so they just continued. And so it's just been problem after problem after problem after problem. And then the city, you know, finally just got tired of it. And then people started coming in, and then the whole city just started burning down. I just think with her case, you know, it's just a slap in the face to the community, you know, to the family. It shows that she has no respect for the community and the family, and that, you know, at the end of the day, his life did not matter.
Hey, Rick, what happened, what Les was talking about with that previous case? When she's supposed to have told the officers don't say anything, it was something that they were showing on TV. They were saying, look, she's involved in another incident with telling officers to be quiet and go back to their vehicle.
I don't know all of the details, but it sounds like someone was shot or killed, and then she basically told them all to cut off their body cameras and let's go talk around the corner.
She did, yeah.
Okay, I see. Is that right? Anybody aware of
that's what I heard? That's the details I heard.
Yeah, I could understand not saying, being like, hey, be quiet, but I can't. Obviously, you can't turn off your body cam.
Well, that's what she told them to do. And so, and that's why I don't really necessarily believe, you know, I don't know, man. I just hear it all the time, you know, people saying, you know, he got a firearm, or, you know, put down your firearm, and it's a cell phone. I mean, it's just been so many cases. It's hard for me to believe, you know, when I hear someone say taser, taser, taser. And you guys are probably right, you know, she probably made a mistake, but it's hard for me to believe that when you didn't heard so many times, you know, people saying things, putting people's life in danger by saying the wrong things. I think he got a gun. He looks like he got a gun. You know, that's not right, man.
Yeah, and I agree with Seth. Like, I don't believe that this was a mistake. Like he said, spilling her coffee is a mistake. It was just recklessness. I don't think she intended to shoot him. She was just reckless. And people got to understand, right? And it's just, it really, and I was on national TV and I was just explaining this. I said, it really bothers me, right, that you had a 26-year veteran officer, right, whose stress level went so high that her mechanics, the way she moves, her thought process broke down. Now, during a lot of the training that I received, they try to push your stress level high as it can, but it's during training, so you know it's not real. But the whole notion to that is that when your stress level's high, you tend not to think straight. So what they want you to do is they want you to respond on automatic pilot. So what they do is how to create an automatic pilot is just to keep training over and over again. Keep training over and over again until it becomes second nature, until you're not thinking about what you're doing. Here you have, right, a 26-year vet, right, who somebody trying to just get away from you. Your stress level rose so damn high that you couldn't even think about grabbing your taser, and you grabbed your gun. I was just saying that's pretty common. What we've seen right there, and the officers on the panel should be able to attest. Is that pretty common in a traffic stop? Somebody just trying to get away? Like, your stress level shouldn't rise on that. There's a lot of things where your stress level will rise in what I call like the oh shit factor, to where you like, oh man, sometimes you get tunnel vision. Me, when I got out the car one time, they started shooting at my vehicle, and I hurried up and ducked, and I started hearing tone like ringing in my ears. And I'm sitting there and I'm like trying to just duck because I didn't even know where the shots was coming from. But I couldn't hear. I couldn't hear because the stress level rose so high. So you start thinking about what to do. So I'm calling for units. My vehicle is being shot at, so I'm behind. So when I come up, I just see this tunnel vision, things that I've never experienced in training. But you start operating on autopilot because the stress level is so high. You're not thinking straight. So you go straight to an autopilot, go to this panic mode. The training supposed to get you to where you're on autopilot, to where the way you're operating, it gets you through that stressful moment. So that's why you get, because I used to always say, yo, why are we doing this again? Well, why are we doing this again? Like, they're like, you don't understand, when your stress level, you think logic now, when you're not logic anymore. So they're trying to get you just to operate on autopilot. So I can't understand why your stress level will be so high on something so common. Like, this is a common thing, somebody trying to run from you. Like, it just bothers me. Like, this was real simple. She should have been able to handle that with no problem.
You will always revert back to your training. You in stressful situations. This is why I periodically do combat and tactical reloads in here in my house. Just if someone decides to kick in my door or something and the stress goes in, you know what I'm saying, Shane? And I have to put some rounds down range in here, I'm going to be able to, my mind is already, okay, I need to put in another magazine. I mean, I use my example, and Ryan and I, we actually argued this. I said, I would have had a better case of shooting the guy in my situation than Kim Potter, because this guy was actively fighting. He kicked me. He was fighting with some paramedics and firefighters, and I still had the wherewithal mentally to immediately step back and draw my taser because I knew I couldn't shoot him. Taser actually failed, and then we had to go to other things, right? But like you said, somebody running, Shane, I know you've had, I mean, that, like, guys run, people, that's what they do. When people don't want to go to jail, they run from you, and you have to act accordingly. What do I do? Okay, he's already in the car. It's probably not the smartest thing in the run. I know I'm Monday night quarterbacking this, but this is how I would have done it. He's already in the damn car. Probably not the smartest thing in the world for me to tase somebody who's probably going to drive off because he's probably going to crash. Me and my partner, let him take off. We'll get in the car. We'll pursue him. If the pursuit gets reckless, we'll terminate the pursuit and we'll get him another day. He's got a warrant for his arrest. That's all. He didn't just kill somebody. You have to look, as an officer, you have to look at the totality of the circumstances at hand right now. What's the worst thing that could have happened is he would have got away.
Exactly. And I have to agree with Seth on piggyback. There's so many times that people outran me, pulled a warrant. I still had I said, man, they outran me. I got their lights in my hand. I said, this is crazy. Pull out the warrant, speak to the judge the next day, come back with the crew and come get them. You can get it another day. I just think this whole thing is crazy. And for 26 years, guys, we talk about resort to training. Her training should resort her to like, you know what? Let me handle this situation how I was trained. And she didn't at all. 26 years of seeing this type of stuff over and over and over again. And she reacted negligently. It's hard for me to fathom. We things happen. Okay, you got to know that things happen. But the amount of training we go through, I don't know, guys. I don't know.
And you know,
I think that's the scariest thing is she was training somebody. So if she can't handle that kind of pressure,
right?
while she's training somebody, what is she doing? She's teaching that whole department, this is what happens when you get scared. Like, I don't know. And then she's telling the public,
better than that,
don't
right?
trust us.
If better than that, if you look at this incident, she didn't even have to intervene. The guy, I guess that she was training, he was going in the car after the subject. Like, she didn't even need to be a part of that. All she had to do was step back and let him go inside. You had another officer going on the passenger side. Then you had the guy going in. If you look at it, she almost shot the officer because he was right in the line of fire.
Crossfire.
Yes. All she had to do was just don't do nothing. Just let the boys handle it. He was going in to go hands on. You had an officer on the passenger seat going in to help. Everything was going as planned until she intervened. She just changed that whole scenario.
Is this the same department with George Floyd, or is this a different department?
No, Brooklyn Park is like a suburb. It's like right next to Minneapolis.
Oh, same state.
Same state.
Yeah.
I actually, man, I need to connect and really talk with Rick, because it seems like there's something, and I hate to do that, but there's something going on, and I know that we need to revamp policing together, but to have these many incidents with these departments in the same close municipality, there's something deeper to you guys know what I'm saying, Shane? And I'm like, there's something going on. Like, I always say, and I know that, and Joe always laughs at me, because I think the California police departments, we lead the way as far as training. If you start looking at all of our uses of forces and shootings and all that for as many cops and stuff we have, I think that we do a really, really good job. But I know that we are pushed on certain mandated training. Like I said, I think it's a godsend that the department that I work for, all of the training that I got. And that's why, Rick, sometimes I'm kind of hesitant that I think we look at this blanket, and Mitch and I have talked about this, as thinking that all police officers get the same amount of training. And I listened to Joe, and I haven't talked to Shane as much, but damn it, Joe probably has more training than 90% of all law enforcement. Just from all of the courses, most cops are not getting all that training.
Yeah.
If you're in all of these specialized units and all that, this is where you get that. And also funding. Your state matters. California, we got money to give police, so they're going to send us. I've been to 3 or 4 gang schools and and instructor schools. I hear that they let some people on other departments go like 10-8 without like going to a full academy and stuff like that. Is that true?
Yeah, that's crazy.
What?
Yeah. And
That's
what I'm hearing.
not to mention,
what city?
Philando was only like 20 minutes from me too, as well.
Wow. Now I can see why Rick feels the way he does. At first, I was like, "Man, Rick is strong with his convictions," and Joe was like, "Well, man." Rick, that's why sometimes, man, it's good to listen for comprehension and understanding, bro. I feel where you're coming from, man.
And I don't have to kind of be in the middle. I can be exactly. I can say how I feel, and I'm an artist. I want to say exactly how I feel, and I know I lose fans and stuff like that, but I have a million over on Facebook, like a million and like maybe 80,000. I can lose 20, and get, 30 more.
Not the ones that matter.
So I have a question for Joe, Cedric, Shane, and Ken, the officers here. Do y'all still subscribe to like consent decrees, and do you think that's an answer for Minneapolis and in that particular area? Do you think that could be something that's effective?
I believe that they set this whole thing up where they they never prosecuted the police. I mean, in like 20 years or something like that. So if you have this, to me, if you have this, where you have the DA that's not going to do it, they're not going to do anything. I mean, why go by the law if you're going to get off, If ain't nothing going to happen to you, I mean, it's like a criminal. Like if you can go in the store and steal, and if ain't nothing going to happen, or if you go to jail, they're going to let you out the next day, back to stealing,
Can you clarify consent decree?
I'm sorry?
Can you clarify consent decree?
What's that? I'm sorry. You got it.
No, he was asking Mitch.
It's basically when
Go ahead, Mitch.
My understanding of consent decrees is federal oversight, right? Where you offer some level of federal oversight to these different particular cities where they may have problematic policing, in this case, Minneapolis, right? And they set so many different parameters and metrics in place to make sure that officers are being held accountable, at least at the federal level, right? So, because they can't oversight themselves, they can't oversee themselves, and you can see that's a problem right now. So, do y'all foresee consent decree still being a viable thing to maybe correct police corruption, as we see?
I think you need
they're definitely investigating, Minneapolis Police Department right now.
Yeah, they're already doing that in Minneapolis.
Yeah. Right. You have to have a group that doesn't have a dog in the fight, so to speak, to really evaluate. It's hard to, it's like when you go to IA, it's hard to try to police yourselves. I think having an outside group who is trained in these issues and these matters with oversight, I think that's a great thing, because it leaves some bias if we are, so to speak, judging ourselves. Well, you know what? In this case, Shane, you was right. In that case, you was wrong. Or I might be right in all cases because I'm among my peers. But when you bring an outside group that doesn't have a dog in the fight, so to speak, they can really evaluate and take a look at the whole situation from beginning to end. And I think that'd be a positive as far as police is concerned.
Mitch and I talked about this before. I'm not above having, review boards that have I think that there should be a mixture of civilians and not current police, but like someone who may be former police that could kind of educate, the civilians maybe on legal things and stuff like that. But I think there should be a mixture. I think consent decrees are necessary. I explained to Mitch, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Tyisha Miller shooting.
Mm-hmm.
What shooting is that?
Tyisha Miller happened on our department in the 90s. So I was still in the military, where they actually
shot the store, right?
They shot the female sleeping. She fell asleep with the gun on her lap.
Yeah.
And then the officers broke the window out to wake her. She grabs the gun. They shoot her. They were cleared in the shooting, very interestingly. But when the feds and stuff came in, they saw a lot of practices and things that the department wasn't doing. So when I first started, man, we had we started carrying the audio recorders. We had to always put out the demographics of our stop. We had to keep no matter who we stopped, we had to put it out. So it went back to the feds. With that, Mitch, it initiated us having to get cameras and recorders and all that stuff and tasers. So I think sometimes it's necessary for the feds to get involved and hopefully shake things up. And it sounds like that's what might need to be happening in Minneapolis.
Yeah. And a lot of, the officers don't live, they don't live in the city. So you having these outside forces coming in. And that's definitely, a problem as well.
I don't understand how oversight could be a bad thing. It's in the industry I'm in, there's a ton of that.
Yeah, but I don't know. We feel here that you should live in the community that that you're enforcing.
Yeah,
but it all depends on the unit you're on.
Rick, that's tough.
Yeah, unit I was in, I went with my family in the same era. I'm policing it. I don't see that.
But there's a ton of different areas that you can live in and still live in this, a similar, environment.
Hey, Rick, I thought Minneapolis did that. They had that at one point, and then it was my understanding they were having some recruitment issues, so they stopped it.
I'm not familiar with that at all. I'm not familiar with that.
What do you guys get? Some officer next door programs?
Yeah, I've heard of that before. My boy actually got a nice house in the officer next door program within the community.
They were doing it out here, but it's just it can be problematic, and that's what there's certain parts I have no problem living in the city, that I was policing, but as far as the specific neighborhood, and I thought you guys have heard me go on record, man. 99% of the people that I had interaction with day to day, even some of the guys I had to chase, man, I ran into a couple of dudes at the store, and they understand it's business because of how I conducted myself as an officer. But there's that small percentage, like Shane is saying, that will be there where it could be problematic for you and your family.
Yeah, Minneapolis and St. Paul is about the same size as the South Side of Chicago. and there's like nice neighborhoods all in Minneapolis. And then, you go 5 blocks down, it's more of, an Hispanic maybe community. And so there's plenty of places you can live if you live in the city, that you won't necessarily be around, like you don't want to live in the,
What's the population of Minneapolis?
That I am not sure. I'm not sure.
I think it's around 350, 400,000, the city itself.
Wow. And see, that's crazy because when you hear Minneapolis, I go, man, it sounds like a major city.
Yeah,
that's
it sounds like it's huge.
The city I police is 350,000, and it's considered a small city.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So
now the metro area's got a few million, but that's
435.
Yeah.
435.
Yeah.
I have about 10 minutes before this segment is over, but I just want to ask the entire panel this question. I want you to we're going to switch on to like the solutionary answer. If you was called to Congress to help with the reform bill, because this happened to me. I had two congressional members ask me, they said, I saw you on CNN and you was pretty much trashing the Republicans' police reform bill and the Democrats' police reform bill. If you had to give 2 proposals to input in the police reform bill, what would they be? And let's start with the officers before we go to the civilians. So, you start out with those 2.
Man, I think the biggest things to change law enforcement is, you guys know I preach big on accountability, right? I think that we do have to hold officers to a higher standard and set a precedence for everybody that when we make mistakes, or if it's malicious, that we're going to be held just as accountable to as our civilian counterparts. I also believe, and Mitch and I've talked about this a lot too, is we have to increase funding in law enforcement in certain areas. If there's something, if we're all a corporation right here, and there's an area in our corporation that's lacking, it is idiotic to take the funds from the portion that's not working well, and then thinking we're going to get a better product from taking more away from it. So my push would be the accountability factor across the board, and maybe also, and I know this is probably a stretch. I know you asked for 3 things, but maybe getting some type of standardized training across the board for all 50 states.
All right, Shane.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. I think the qualified immunity, you get rid of that, it holds a lot more accountable. If you get away qualified immunity, like mentioned, it's all about accountability. I think there's a lot of protections that's afforded to police officers that's not afforded to the civilian population. And I think brought this out, one of you guys brought it out earlier, we as officers or former officers are held to a higher standard. So if there are malpractice, things happen, things that go wrong, we should be held more accountable because we got the training. And just to piggyback off what said, we need more training. If the department's not doing well in a certain area, just like with Dr. Gibson about implicit bias, there were so many things in that test that I took. I had to reevaluate myself and say, okay, wait a second, Shane, there's some things you need to take a look at, some things you need to change. So, and that takes money to do. So we realize that there's certain things that we are predisposed to, or because of our environment, we need the training to have qualified psychologists to come in and say, hey, you need to change your view of how you're looking at this person or that person. Mm-hmm. So I have to agree with the training is necessary. We need money. If you're lacking in a certain area and now say, you know what, let's pull the funding from there, how are you going to improve? So those are the 2 major things I would say, training and qualified immunity that can really help us as officers.
Shane, I got a question before we go, Joe. Yeah. So I really think the part of the thing is I think a lot of people don't understand qualified immunity. Are you saying get rid of it, or should it be revamped?
Revamped. I think it should be revamped. I think there's too many loopholes as far as officers are concerned, and we want to make the public feel, since we're public servants, that we're on the same playing field. We're held to a higher standard, but it's got to be fair across the board. And I think the way things are set up right now, it's not fair. We need to change it. We need to bring some like you talked about having justice. The justice is not fair across the board. So I think that needs to take, you need to look into that.
That's pretty good because I gave similar responses when I was asked, and things was qualified immunity. I try to look at what do I need to actually do the job and stay protected while doing the job. And my experiences and examples of when I see officers who violate and stepped up and said something, I've received conversations like, "What are you worried about it? Why are you protecting these jerk offs? So what? Like it won't come out of your pocket. Let the city cut the check, right?" So they know that they have a wide range of protection. So I definitely expressed my concern with qualified immunity. I said, "Am I out here doing a job like I look at it's like insurance, right? If you're not at fault, you're covered. If you are at fault, you going outside the training, you're being negligent, then you shouldn't be protected. It should be like having your own insurance. You have somebody, if there's a claim against your insurance, each officer should have an insurance. And if there's a claim against your insurance, if you are found to fall within the guidelines of what you was trained, the policy and procedure, you did exactly what you're supposed to do, you should be protected. If not, you should be on your own. It should go against your own insurance. And you have to maintain that insurance throughout your employment. Now, you keep getting hits like a car insurance, and they have to paying out because you just don't get it, then you won't be able to afford your premiums, and you automatically would just eliminate yourself out of the job. We talked about Officer Pantaleo with Eric Garner. He had 40-something complaints already. Majority of them was founded. The city has paid out thousands on just him, that one officer alone. If he had his own insurance, he'd have been eliminated a long time ago. Right. It probably wouldn't have got to Eric Garner. So we got to kind of figure out, how do you protect the officers that's doing it right, but how do you take that same protection away from the officers who do it wrong? And so we started talking about, because somebody, I said this, he said, "Well, that's going to cost a lot." I said, "Do you know how much the citizens pay out right now, taxpayers, in bad policing? Billions of dollars, billions." So to have an officer now have to pay a portion, right, just to maintain his insurance, we can afford it. We could take a fraction of what's already been paid out and cover all the officers if we needed to. So that was one of because qualified immunity, it really protects the officer's pocket. You just really, it's sad because Derek Chauvin, he's going to prison for a very long time with an expensive pension that the taxpayers will pay. He's going to be in prison collecting a huge pension. And that should be unheard of. He should not be collecting a big ass pension while he's in prison. So
real quick, can I address something? Since there was a comment pinned directly to me, right? You just pinned. You just pinned the comment. I guess, on a panel, there's always somebody they'll pick, and I guess this guy just not good for JJ. He's got an axe to grind with me, right? Because he said, I guess my demeanor seems cold, and this guy right here, the comment before. So, I mean, I don't see how anything in my demeanor's been any different than anyone else, but if you want to reach out to me and you want to come do some work with me in the community and come put the same blood, sweat, and tears that I have in my community, come on out here. Until then, we can't have a conversation because I know what I've done for my community. So for you to think that I'm dismissive or I don't care, I don't know what reality you're talking about. I mean, my life is my reality and my experience is reality. But you are welcome to come out here and come to these communities and these schools and come on out here with me and put in that work.
Okay, and the second thing was, I think that we shouldn't be investigating ourselves. I really have a problem with that. Most internal affairs officers or police officers work side by side. I know people who got transferred to IA, and you have a relationship with the people now that you're tasked to investigate. I think that's a horrible setup. I wouldn't mind having a federal task force, which is combined of state and local, because a lot of times when we start looking at these violations, you have federal and state violations. And a state officer doesn't investigate a federal violation. That's why you hear them say, we're going to bring in the feds. When I was on a federal task force, when we was dealing with city ordinances and city crimes, I was the head. I was the lead in that because I would go get the warrant. I would testify in court. But it was on a federal. You have a federal officer if you wasn't deputized as a federal officer. So I would like to see a federal task force like the NTSB consist of investigators who are very familiar with policy, procedure, protocol, and you kind of put maybe some attorneys and some civilians a part of a task force to investigate these incidents when it comes down to excessive force, police shooting. So you can get a mixture of several different, not just one viewpoint from law enforcement. You got a civil rights attorney, you have maybe a civilian a citizen. Mm-hmm. What do you say?
Mm-hmm. Sir, yeah, a citizen, an ex-officer, also
right.
A current officer.
Somebody who could be on this panel and could discuss, like we have these discussions all the time. Kenny was like, "Wow, that was pretty good. I didn't look at it like that. I didn't see it like that." So it has to be comprised of different people with different backgrounds and different experiences, because officers tend to lean towards officers. So this whole notion of internal affairs, I just strongly I disagree with that notion. Like I think that's just a bad idea. I think it's a bad idea.
And Joe, if I may piggyback off of that, I'm just going by personal experience. I'm not painting a broad brush. I had an incident where I had to turn an officer in. He did something wrong. And two of the investigators, this guy had more experience than I had, been on the force. And he said, "Browder, are you sure you seen what you seen? Are you sure about that?" And I'm like, whoa. I felt the setup. I felt it. So I strongly believe you definitely need an outside entity to come take a look to investigate us. That's based on my experience.
Yeah.
I think
yeah.
I could jump in,
maybe
Joe.
even some civilians.
Yeah, I said that.
Yes. Definitely.
Yeah, I said
I
that.
could jump in, Joe, and maybe add. I'm gonna add two different ones than what y'all already covered. I agree with a lot around the revamping of the qualified immunity. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I also think we need like a national database just to keep track of like officers' record, right? I mean, a lot of that information about police officers and their miscode of conduct is always kept so privately. So I don't know. I know they tried many times through Congress to try to make a more transparent database about the performance of officers. I think that's one. And that's one against cops, I would say, just to hold them accountable. But one that's for police, right? We always talk about how we can hold cops accountable. People like Cedric, who's doing community work in the community, I think is crucially important. And me and Cedric agree with that a lot. When officers are doing the right thing, I think we need to figure out a way to incentivize officers. I see a lot of times officers are working overtime. They're working different gigs, right? This to try to put food on the table. And I think that creates a lot of high stress, long weeks, right? And I think it becomes problematic for, police officers, right? So I think we need to figure out a way to pay officers, figure out what kind of metric when officers do things right. Let's pay them bonuses. I don't know if annually, semi-annually, but when officers in the community like Cedric that's building relationships and trying to be community driven, I think we need to acknowledge that and put dollars behind that.
But I also think
I want to make a comment on the I'm kind of curious hear what Rick's got to say too, if he was going to speak in Congress. But first of all, I got to say that it's impressive to actually talk to law enforcement who are like, we need to qualified immunity, no, or revamp it or change it. I'm blown away. Wow. But how about on touching what you just said, Mitch? I agree with pretty much everybody else that's already spoken before. How about decriminalizing certain laws? I mean, we call on the police to do everything. Now, I live in a community and I'm blessed with resources that if I've got somebody that's suicidal or angry, I've got resources to reach out. My number one phone call may not be the police. In poor communities, they may not have that. So, and an officer may not be fully equipped to deal with that.
I agree.
That's just one example, but other things, like how many traffic instances or traffic stops need to be criminalized? I don't know. These are things that just take a look at. But we've got over we got over 100,000 federal laws that's criminalized behavior some of it's written by bureaucrats, but then you break that down to the state, break that down to the county, break that down to the municipality, and officers are called for everything. I think that needs to be, we need to cut down on that or cut back on some of that.
That's a good point, Ken.
Definitely.
You made a nice point. Oh, Rick, I'm sorry. So sorry.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Rick. I apologize. You didn't speak. I'm sorry, sir.
Oh, no. I was just going to say, I definitely agree with a lot of things you guys are saying. I think anything to help the situation is definitely better. Because, I mean, I understand the stress and I understand all of the working hours and I understand all of these different things. I do believe, you do not have to be, aggressive. I mean, I've been in situations where I dated, certain women a few different women that was very aggressive, and I never reached a 3 in the situation. So you got to have people out there that's that's working in those jobs and those high stressful jobs, not to be aggressive too. I don't think fire and fire goes together. I think fire and water, kind of helps the situation a lot. I would definitely like to say that the Dante Wright, he was a kid. If he ran, if he did something wrong, at the end of the day, he was a kid. And Kim Potter, I would like to say that I understand why she reacted the way she is, because maybe mentally she should not have been on the force. You see it all day long. You see people, someone accidentally almost hit them and then they fall out and then they start crying and they're crying in the mall because they're videotaped. There's a lot of things that's wrong. Mental health is definitely real. And so she probably shouldn't have been doing, that kind of job. So when I saw her react the way, I mean, that's kind of like what I understand it, a little bit, because that's a mental health thing, and that's somebody that shouldn't have been on the force. That people definitely need help. And so my 2 things would be, agreeing with a lot of stuff you guys said, would be, definitely living in the community that you are, policing, not necessarily, in the hot spots or in the certain, but there's a ton of different places you can live and you'll be right next to someone of color. You will, opposed to coming in from like Roseville or some, Minnetonka, where there's like no people of color around you. I think you should live, in the city, but in a nice part, definitely. And then I would love to see, them having the community leaders helping them in a lot of different situations, helping make decisions, before you send something out, like, that just happened recently downtown Minneapolis, Amir Locke, instead of sending out, he was a suspect and showing his gun and all that, having somebody in place from the community that can help them make better decisions, not to anger the community, and I think that's about it.
Hey, Rick,
Joe, may I say something, Joe? May I just interject for a second?
Yeah, you go ahead.
I just want to piggyback off what Mitch said about being incentivized. I think teachers are underpaid and they're just doing their job. I think as police officers, we are supposed to just do a job. We knew that coming in, we wasn't going to get rich. We knew coming in, we probably going to have a meager salary, depending on how you move up in rank. But I think an officer should be an officer because you're there to serve and protect and to do your job. Not that you're supposed to serve and help others. So I don't completely agree with incentivizing, an attaboy, a pat on the back, what have you. But we knew what we was getting into. And if you want to be a police officer, the goal is to serve and protect. No matter what type of salary, no matter what they're giving you, you got to be the same through the board. That's all I wanted to add. That's
Hey, Shane.
Yes, sir.
Shane, I get, and you're 100% right. The goal is to serve the community, but we're looking at, this is like the solutionary part of the segment, right? And I get what he's saying, incentivize, because I know I had my first kid when I was 22 years old. I was on a job when I was 20, and in 6 months, right? I didn't make a lot of money. So to provide a little bit more for my family, I had to work extremely a lot of overtime. I left work, go to this gig, go to this part-time job, go to this overtime. I think what Mitch is saying, which I totally agree, right? If you put officers in a situation where they're not constantly working to try to make a living, because you already said and you acknowledge that it's the money, it's not there for the money. It's bad. You don't make a lot of money. But if you take away the overtime, you raise the salary, you have an officer now that has just a shift to work and a lot of rest, and then before he comes back to work to actually serve a community. So you're talking about somebody who doesn't have the stress of constantly trying to work and getting his rest and coming back on the street, because we always want to put out a better product. So his solution to a better product is stop having them work so many jobs. Let's incentivize them. Let's give them an opportunity to make more money without have to work in 24 hours to make a decent living.
Also, Joe, the incentives are already in place. Like there's police quotas. There's incentives already in place for police to do the wrong things, right? And so
there's police quotas.
Are they not police quotas anymore?
Man, I don't know. I did 15 years. I never saw one.
Y'all never seen police quotas, like police brutality, stop and frisk out in New York?
That's not.
That was a different era. Stop New York. That was a completely.
So a quota is a benchmark that you have to make for amount of arrests or something like that. So
the traffic police in my town got quotas.
So there's no police quotas anymore.
When are they officially called quotas? I think it's unlawful to have quotas.
It is. Yeah. It is unlawful to have quotas. They just encourage you to go out and
activity.
We got to be careful with that. I mean,
however y'all want to label it. My overall point is, I just think officers. We talk so much about holding officers accountable, calling out when they do wrong. When you have a 12 months and the officers, whatever benchmark you want to use, they go 12 months and do a great job. I'm a banker, and there's an industry term in banking: incentives create behaviors. So do you want to put money behind bad policing, or you want to put money behind good policing? Chicago has a $300 million budget set aside every year just to settle wrongful shootings and wrongful arrests. What if we actually incentivized and promoted better policing? We wouldn't have such a high budget. So that's all I'm saying. We can create all these policies to hold cops accountable, but let's take care of the cops that's doing something right. Let's pay them good money.
I agree 100%. I don't know where all of these cops are getting paid $100,000. I think everybody'd be signing up to be a cop. Probably in you're looking at California, maybe the average income for a police officer is not $100,000.
So why do you pay so much attention to the cops?
Because it makes for interesting. One of the things that this brother said in here that I thought was pretty good too, to piggyback off of what you and Mitch said, and even the doctor was saying, is the give and take that, because we do talk about a lot what officers have to do. It's incumbent for us in the community too to do it's going to take a team effort on both sides. Like I don't think, and that's why I kind of got fired up before we started, because I don't think there's anybody who's inherently bad. I look at, Mitch calls me overly objective said, because I look at good and bad, and Joe, you see me so far, I'm consistent. Even if I'm consistently wrong, fellas, I'm consistent. Good and bad, and then I'm gonna treat you accordingly. I don't care if you're green. That's why you guys see I can stand on my square about Potter, because I don't care that she's a cop. And like you said, Joe, you and Mitch, you guys saw all the flack I took on Friday night, man. Hey Shane, I could have used you. I know that Joe was busy, but I could have used you. I was Tupac on Friday night.
Hey, he was needing more units bad, bro.
Wow. Hey,
I was fighting another cop. Man, I was fighting.
Hit on the text. I got your back, bro.
I was in there fighting other cops, man. Like, man, this is about right or wrong, bro. It has nothing to do with the bad, just right or wrong. So
right.
And hey, Rick, I got a question for you.
Go for it.
Hey, you know a lot of activists, right?
Yeah, I am an activist.
Okay. In your circle of activism, do Do you ever take a ride along with the police?
No, I've never done that before.
Has anybody within your circle have just did a ride along? So you kind of understand exactly what an officer goes through day in, day out?
No, but I can definitely, I can ask and see if they're ever done it before.
I think that should really be encouraged, because I'm talking with a few here and in my community, and just so you can have a different look and not only ride with the police, go through the training, the scenario, the stress house, because it gives you a really different viewpoint on when you actually go and you ride and you actually see what actually goes on, because people think is when you say you don't have to use force, like the job sometimes requires you to use force. And when you're there and you see it actually plays out, because when you hear about it, you hear a totally different story than when you actually see it. When you see somebody, or you're going through the stress house and you knock on the door and somebody run out with a knife, you see it firsthand. And these scenarios are normally based on incidents that happened before, so they can give you a really good experience of understanding what officers have gone through.
Right.
You know, you just knock on the door. You know, they'll put you. You'll use paint balls and a gun. They'll say, "Hey, you the cop. Respond to this 911 call." You knock on the door. All of a sudden, somebody come out and start shooting a paintball at you, and you sitting there like you got this whole mindset. I could be nice to these. I could be nice, and it's gonna turn out right. Officers supposed to be dealing with the people who don't normally follow the rules of society, right? Those people ain't always nice. So when you experience it and see it, you'll have a much more balanced viewpoint to go, okay, let me look at this piece by piece and not just have this broad blanket. No, we should just be nice to everybody. Officers conduct themselves professionally. During this profession, sometimes you gotta use force depending on the resistance or fight someone's giving you. But a lot of people don't understand that until you actually start experiencing it. I was dealing with this activist here, and we had this conversation. We did the ride along together. This dude had a whole different viewpoint. He was like, yo, people could be so crazy. It's like, what? I'm like, this is what an officer deals with day in and day out. Now, it doesn't take away the officers like a Derek Chauvin who abused the badge, but you got a lot of dudes who this is what they deal with. And now you got an officer like these guys here in this live who will be out on the street and doing their thing like they supposed to. Then you got people that will run up, put a camera in their face, and start agitating and bringing more stress to already hostile situation. So now I'm dealing with this. Now I've got to deal with this guy. I know my rights. Yo, and I tell people all the time, if an officer is excessive, he's bad, he's going to present himself really fast. You don't have to try to dig it from him. I see these auditors doing that time and time again. I'm going to test them. Sit back and relax. A bad officer will reveal himself just like that. So when we start talking about the balance and the solutionary part of this conversation, enlighten yourself a little. And I'll be, and said knows, I think the change need to start with law enforcement, need to start with the professionals doing this job. But at the same time, as the community, we need to, if you see that, we need to try to have a better understanding. And to have that better understanding is to do the ride-alongs. Go through the stress house training to see exactly why officers or people are like, yo, that's a paranoid job. You prepare for the worst, right? But you hope the best plays out in every situation. So having that experience and understanding, you're going to have a whole different viewpoint. So for you who's really deep in the community and knowing a lot of activists, you need to encourage that as a part of educating yourself in this fight. I think it would help the situation. I really believe it would help the situation.
Well, Joe, in my city, before we got on, after you passed a background check, you had to do 2 ride-alongs. That was a requirement. You had to do 2 ride-alongs to see if this is something for you, because you may pass a background check. You're like, you know what? I'm not even going to go to the academy. Forget this. It's too much. You had to go through 2, one at night and one during the day. So that kind of helped us to see what we was going to get into, on a daily basis.
Right. And I totally understand a little bit. I'm originally from Chicago. 115th in Yale. And at one point here in the, in the community, I actually moved back to the community. And yeah, I've seen a ton of shootings in my house, you know, getting shot up. So yeah, I got a rough idea of, you know, of some of the things that go down.
Right.
And then I go out every week, so I see people, you know. Once here, I believe I think the people in charge. I can't think of the names right now, but you know, the people that's that represents the different communities and came together and made some decisions. I don't agree with some of the changes they made. I don't think you should have never told the police that you're gonna, you know, get rid of them, or, you know, and all the different stuff that kind of came along, because that had a lot of officers, you know, quit, and it just totally changed this whole community where, you know, where you can go in a popular area right now and you can see people riding around in their cars doing spins, shooting out of their cars right now. Like a lot goes on here, especially since the whole George Floyd thing. It's the whole city has changed. Like I believe it at one point we maybe had like, you know, maybe 150 shootings, you know, maybe like 2019, something like that. Like right after the George Floyd, like 6 months into it, we were at like 400 and something shootings. Wow. So yeah, I've seen the city change.
Right. Have you ever seen someone just be so overly bearing on a police that you felt like, damn, that was kind of unfair? Have you ever seen that?
Oh, actually, I don't want to sound like, you know, like some of my friends are police officers. I don't want to sound like that guy, but there has been a couple of police officers that I was like with out, and someone came up and said something to it, and I'm not having it, you know.
And just you know, what about your experiences, Mitch?
I haven't done a ride along before, no, but I do have a few officers that are close friends of mine, and you know, I'm just very simple. I mean, I just like to call out bad policing, and I like to celebrate and recognize good policing. And so, I had experiences on the bad side of the police, and I had good experiences with the police, and so I'm just pretty much in between.
Right. I know for me, I'm sorry, go ahead, Joe.
No, I was about to ask Kenny about his experience.
Yeah, I've never ridden in the front seat of a squad car. And I've had positive experiences. I've had negative experiences. I've had positive experiences with white officers, black officers, Latino officers, negative experiences with black officers, Latino officers, white officers. One thing I do want to say is, you know, when I've interacted with law enforcement officers, either in the community or online, I honestly didn't think I would ever actually run into four or you know, more than two officers at once that said they wanted to make massive changes to qualified immunity or get rid of it. So this actually has helped kind of change my view a bit. So I want to say thanks to everybody that's on here. So, you know, they're people, you know, officers are people. They're not superhuman. They're not super evil. They're people.
All right. To kind of piggyback off what you just said, sir, I tell Joe this on a sidebar all the time. One of the reasons why I became a police officer was because of bad policing. I grew up in an era in the Bronx where stop and frisk, I got thrown. I was 13, 14, 15. I could have had a suit on, glasses, tie, thrown on the ground in the train station, come out of school, back to school. It was so bad. And my dad had us wear suits and ties and glasses, and I still was getting stopped. So I'm like, okay, something has to change. Seeing all that stuff, I felt that, you know, let me get on the inside. And I felt that if I can get on the inside, I can make an impact. So a lot of times, a lot of officers that are on board came from my background, Joe's background, Seth's background, who had bad experiences, but I didn't allow that to carry that on when I dealt with the public myself. The reason why I was different, because I remember how I felt when I was thrown on the ground. I remember how I felt when I was arrested for no reason whatsoever. So that helped motivate me to be like, you know what? Hopefully I can make a dent and make a change.
Hey, Seth, let me ask you something. Not Seth, but Shane.
Yes,
do
sir.
you mind sharing your results on what you kind of lean towards?
Oh man, hold on. Okay. Wow. Okay. It's so funny. The doctor got back to me. I didn't get the actual scores, but I'll tell you right now, it said strong automatic preference for European Americans compared to African American, 24%. Moderate automatic preference for European American compared to African Americans, 27%. Slight automatic preference for European American compared to African American, 17%. And then my other score. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Joe. I'm sorry.
So your biases, right, was it was against blacks?
Yes, exactly. I'm like, okay, wait a second. I'm like, how did this happen? I'm like, no, wait a minute, but maybe there's something that I'm not connected. You know, but here's the funny thing. I worked in a predominantly African American community, and my thing was that one of the reasons why, and this is the inverse, one of the reasons why I got out of law enforcement was because I felt that the sentences were unjust. I felt that for certain crimes that other nationalities were committing, we getting heavy sentences. So I felt like, personally, I said, sometimes I think I'm doing more harm than good. And plus some other internal issues that was happening at the department I was in that made me get out. But when I saw these results, I was like, okay, what's really going on here? But it was eye opening for that. I tell you that, it was very eye opening. So, you know.
Hey, Cedric.
Yeah.
You want to share?
Give me a second. I just said it to myself. Leslie, why are you laughing?
I'm not.
Hold on.
I know your results weren't mine.
I'm curious what you.
Hey, Joe, I was like, man, what's going on? I said to myself, second, what's going on in my head? That this helps. And then here's the thing. I took the test 2-3 times, and it came back the same thing. I was like, okay, something is wrong here. What's really going on?
On a race test, Joe, I had no automatic preference on a race test.
Everybody's.
So mine says strong automatic preference for European Americans, but compared to African Americans, 24%. Moderate automatic preference to European Americans compared to African Americans, 27%. Slight preference for Europeans compared to blacks, only 17%.
So your bias is against
same
blacks.
Scores. Yep.
So does anybody?
But is that right? No, because I mean the percentages are in comparison to what? Is it based on? I mean that's slightly low, right? Am I reading that correctly?
Oh, not because it's compared to the people who took the test. I don't know how many people took the test.
Right.
You want to know what mine was?
We have, brother. We got the same scores, man. You're jacked up, bro.
I thought that graph was like everybody. That the graph was showing everyone who took the test. This is kind of how things kind of panned out. That's what I thought that graph was.
I was looking at it out of 100%, and I'm like, well, only 27 out of 100.
It said,
yeah.
What do you think Les is going to say?
Go ahead, Les.
95%.
We all know what mine said.
What it says.
95%.
It wasn't that high.
Go ahead, Les.
Les is
it was
black.
actually only 20.
Black. She's black.
No, I'm not. Mine was I have a very strong preferential to African American. I think it was low though. It was only like 27%. But I'll bet it was higher than all of yours, which is quite interesting, I think.
Joe, what was yours, Joe?
I'm pulling mine up right now.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I'm pulling mine up right now. Mine says, let's see. Your response suggests that you have an automatic preference to black people versus white people.
Did you scroll down and look at the percentage though?
Yeah, I'm going down right now.
Oh, let me look at it.
I think whoever gets the highest wins.
Winner, chicken dinner, ding, ding, ding.
24, mine's 24%.
Interesting.
I think they all say 24%. I don't know if that. Do these numbers?
Yeah, but 24% white people.
Black.
Well,
Am I the only? Oh, I was gonna say, am I the only one who preferred black people?
Nah, mine's at 24 black, but
There we
that's
go.
that's pretty interesting.
right.
Can I chime in on one thing that you guys were talking about?
Yeah, go ahead, because I'm about to
I
close it
just
down.
want to. Okay, I just want to play devil's advocate, and this goes to none of you because I think that you are all wonderful police who are in the community. But just like you think that people should ride around with the police, I think that if you're serving a community, you should spend some of your time off hanging out with the people in that community also and getting to know those people so that you're not so quick to judge them when they yell because they're mad and that's just who they are, or if they run when they see police because that's just what they know. I think that more police need to be in the community, not just policing the community that they police. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It makes a lot of sense.
I just want to make that point. Just as much as the community should do ride-alongs, I think it should be the opposite also.
For me, it doesn't matter whether you're on or off duty. You should always be in the community building, constantly building. It wouldn't matter to me one way or another, but there's definitely, you should be in the community. Policing doesn't mean you just make an arrest. It means you're out, you're serving the community. That serving the community could be mentoring a kid, could be explaining to him exactly the things that he's going through, especially a lot of these poor communities that, you see a lot of absentee dads. So I had more of a passion to that because I didn't have a dad coming up. So I was there a lot doing the mentoring and going to the schools, checking on kids and making deals like, yo, if you go to school and you do well, this charge, I'll make sure I'll get to the judge and make sure we wipe that. I mean, that's, to me, was a part of policing, not necessarily just locking people up. I think it's a little bit more than that.
I agree with Les. I would say this.
What? Say that again, Sid. What? One more time for the people in the back. What?
People in the back row, I agree with Les. Check this out. I think they're both equally as important because I think when I would go to the county schools and speak to the kids when I was in uniform, I think it was more impactful. Sharing true, genuine stories because they see me in uniform, but they don't see me as a robot while I'm in uniform. Mm-hmm. And they, and I would share some of my shortcomings and things that, because everybody's like, man, Sid's such a nerd. He probably was a straight A student. And I share, you know what? I had to go to summer school to get my, diploma. And then, guys are like, oh shit, he's human, And I think, while you're in that uniform and you got the shield and all that, they start seeing, okay, this is a person who has feelings. I share things about my family and things like that. I think it makes us more relatable. So, Leslie, I actually started doing a thing where I only showed up in uniform. And then maybe after like a couple of months, then I started showing up out of uniform and playing basketball and football and stuff like that. And I think personally for me, I think it was more impactful starting that they saw, okay, this dude is human, being able then to transition out to play, playing ball and stuff with the kids. Right.
But instead too, it's just like walking the beat. I used to get out my car. I don't have to drive around. I'll get out my car, walk the streets. By doing that helped you solve crime. The grandmothers, the uncles, the aunties, everybody would come, hey, Officer Browder, you got to be a part of the community. It's necessary,
Yeah. Well, we're shutting it down. Thanks everybody for attending the conversation. Appreciate everybody's input. We kept it respect. Oh, somebody said, what happened to Kenny? You ain't tell Kenny didn't tell us about his score.
I think I must have misunderstood. I put the I didn't copy the graph. I copied the big picture.
Hey, Ken was like, damn, I almost got away with not having He said, with all these black folks on here, I don't want to read my damn score.
I don't know if I want to read mine. What's that? Oh, I gotta go. Okay. No. It came out, and this is the reason I took it over and over and over again, because I'm like, okay, man, I'm a dude. I'm biased. I got preferences. I got prejudices, and they just kept coming up as no statistical preference between black and white, no statistical preference between.
Oh, so you came up neutral.
Gay and straight. No statistical preference between male and female in the workforce. And I'm like, I have a pulse. I mean, there's something wrong here. I mean,
what test did you take? All 3 tests?
Yeah, I took all 3 of them.
Yeah, because there's a bunch of tests in those particular categories that says you're pretty neutral. That's actually a better standard than anybody in this panel.
Yeah. I was just gonna say Kenny's the winner overall.
Yeah, Kenny.
I only
Kenny.
Hey, thanks a lot. Like I tell y'all guys, when
Thank
it comes
you, Joe.
down to standing up and fighting for yourself, I'll be the first one to tell you, do what you got to do, but please don't push it so far where you become a hashtag and we're talking about your case and your family's grieving. Your fight is definitely in the courtroom. So please don't push it so bad that you become a hashtag.
Right.
Officers are getting more suspended. They're getting charged. They're getting convicted. We still got a lot of work to do with accountability, but please take your fight to the courtroom. You guys be safe, and thank you for coming on the panel.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks for having me, man. Thank you.
Love you guys.
Thanks to all you guys. Even you, Les.
Love y'all too.
Love you guys. Take care, man.
Hope you guys like me better.
Yeah, Rick, you all right, man.
All right, thanks, man.
You good people, Rick. Good people, brother.
Some of my best
safe,
friends
man.
are police officers, man.
You too, Ken. Take care, man.
See ya. It's good seeing you.